I'm Jason O'Brien, WAMPO staff. I'd just like to take a moment to introduce Dave Barber, the next speaker in our series, and just give a brief orientation. We're going to talk about infill development. Developing and revitalizing established areas has a lot of benefits. I'm just going to mention a couple that we've discussed here at WAMPO over the past couple of months. First is the appeal to young professionals who are moving to older, walkable neighborhoods in unprecedented numbers all over the country, including the Midwest. Chris Lineberger discussed this when he came in November, outlining the structural shift in development that's happening as millennials become the largest generation. We also heard about the importance of our talent ecosystem from the Chung Report, which is Wichita Community Foundation's deep dive study of the region's economy. Other recent presentations at WAMPO have also covered the changing needs and preferences of retired boomers and empty nesters, many of who now prefer to have more housing choices and smaller units located closer to services. All of this potentially relates back to infill development. Additionally, as we've talked with a lot of our member jurisdictions, it's become clear that many of them would like to pay more attention to their core areas and unlock the potential of those core areas for tackling challenges like community identity, tourism, sense of community, and quality of life that can be addressed by filling in addition to spreading out. One strategy that's already been adopted is Wichita's Urban Infill Strategy that's in the City and County Joint Community Investments Plan. Dave Barber is going to talk to us today about that strategy and about what's being done. Since 1999, Dave has been the Advanced Plans Division Manager with Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Department. He previously served for 3 years as Planning Director of the Grand Island Hall County Regional Planning Commission in Grand Island, Nebraska. He also has 20 years of municipal planning experience with various urban and rural municipalities in the province of Alberta, Canada. After Dave's finished, I'll be coming back up here to ask a few discussion questions. But with that, I'd like to introduce Dave Barber.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jason, and good afternoon to you all. Happy to have this opportunity to talk briefly about Wichita's Urban Infill Initiative, and hopefully this will not be more than just interesting and informative. Hopefully you'll see something in this that maybe you can take back to your own communities that might be appropriate, applicable in your particular situation or circumstance. So with that, we will move forward here. So why urban infill? Well, basically at the highest level of planning, urban infill is a key city placemaking element because really urban infill is all about restoring lost vibrancy of place, reversing disinvestment in neighborhoods and place, revitalizing, recreating, or enhancing existing sense of place. Very important, maximizing return on existing public infrastructure investments, where we have infrastructure that may not be fully utilized, and then also attracting new population, economic investment to an existing place. So urban infill is good for the city of Wichita. As you can appreciate, Wichita embodies over 140 years of urban placemaking activity. The changing urban form in Wichita over the many decades and how it's morphed and evolved has created both opportunity and challenges for urban infill. But basically, urban infill is a good thing for Wichita, and here are some of the reasons why. It helps meet projected future housing market demands over the next 20 years as we see them today. It utilizes existing underdeveloped or vacant properties, and by doing so will increase property valuations and taxes on property the city has to service but gets no economic return in terms of its public infrastructure investments. It utilizes existing infrastructure which often has excess capacity. It creates a higher return on investment when the city has to go in and maintain existing infrastructure, notwithstanding whether or not there are vacant properties adjacent to it or not, because it's part of a systems approach to the city's system of assets. And then it reduces the cost and need of expanding the existing system of assets to the suburban areas. So with that, The community investment plan, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Community Investment Plan that was completed back in late 2015-16 contains an element. It's called the Wichita Urban Infill Initiative, and it basically advocates for accelerated rates of urban infill activity over the next 20 years in this area depicted on the map here, and it extends essentially from 29th Street on the north down to 31st on the south, and from Rock to Ridge Road. This is a large area, but it's what we refer to as the mature, established area of Wichita. And the goal of the Community Investment Plan, you can see here the 2035 Future Growth Concept Map, is to help increase infill activity in terms of new population and new employment activities in this area. You can see the area here. This represents 40% of the city of Wichita limits. So it's a sizable portion of the city. Notwithstanding, you can see the tan color here are areas of new housing, and the darker brown are areas of new employment. So you can see the bulk of the future growth anticipated for Wichita over the next 20 years is still largely located in the periphery of the city limits. But we have identified these are the infill opportunity areas. You can see here's a West Street corridor. There's a lot of opportunity for infill, both industrial, commercial, as well as residential. And of course, where we have the mixed use, this is the Wichita State campus here. So there's a lot of opportunities. And the goal here, and this is a larger shot, is to accelerate the current rate of new housing development in this area. Currently, it's about 4% of the total new housing units in Wichita. We want to have a threefold increase from 4 to 12% of all new housing units in Wichita over the next 20 years will be concentrated in this area. Still, it's a modest proportion, but it's a significant increase from the current trend. And of course, a lot of that's happening in the downtown area here. And this map also shows our neighborhood revitalization plans that have been done over the last 15 years, which are largely intended to promote the revitalization of these areas so they become more vibrant. So moving forward here, I think it's useful to review the pattern of urban growth and development in Wichita. 70% of the established central area was developed prior to 1960, and 22% was developed in the decade 1910 to 1920. This is a representative example here. This is an era of limited private automobile ownership. You can see we have a very tight pattern of street network and very small rectangular residential lots. This pattern lends itself to accessibility in terms of active transportation modes. Then we move to the next decade. Whoops. Let's see. The next decade here is between 1950 and 1960. Almost a third of the ECA was platted and developed in that decade. And this is the era of the one-car household. And still, it's a grid pattern, tight streets, larger rectangular lots, but still relatively accessible. And these patterns were not designed to accommodate automobiles, either on-street parking or off-street parking. So why is all that important? Because the historic development pattern of this area doesn't lend itself to heavy automobile use. Also, we have some other things that were going on in that period of time. We have a lot of what's called the accessory dwelling unit or the granny suite, and we have a lot of duplexes that are found in this part of the city. And the reason is that prior to 1937, Wichita's urban residential zoning district did not distinguish between one and two family dwelling units. So you could have either a single family or a duplex family in the city of Wichita prior to 1937. And also it encouraged the accessory dwelling units. So after 37, the zoning code was revised to distinguish between one and two family dwelling units. So the net result is we have this random mix of one and two family dwelling units in the areas of Wichita that were developed prior to 1937. And there are also a lot of accessory dwelling units in this area. And the other situation is the development standards in the zoning code were such that they allowed for a different type of building footprint on the parcels that are different than what is described in the code today. We have a very suburban-oriented zoning code today. So the net result is what we call nonconformity of existing dwelling units in the older area with the current zoning code. Now you can get variances and go through a permitting process to mitigate some of these problems if you want to make changes to your existing development. But the problem is, overall, nonconformity generally leads to disinvestment. And the next slide here shows where we have a high concentration of vacant or underutilized property, the purple color here. You can see we have large concentrations kind of north and east of downtown here. Coincidentally, this is the area of the city where we have the largest concentration of infrastructure needing repair and replacement. So these are the challenges that were identified in the community investment plan, looking at 4 particular impediments to accelerated rates of infill activity. And of course, there's factors other than these, but these are the ones that the plan has chosen to concentrate on. And that is, generally, neighborhoods are concerned about any kind of change and are very non-supportive of change in their neighborhood. We also have regulatory barriers with our existing zoning code that are not flexible and adaptive to accommodate accelerated infill in a timely and inexpensive manner. We have the infrastructure modernization issues and costs. Oftentimes the development will come in, particularly commercial, where the water or sewer main is undersized or it's old, so the developer has to come in and pay for upsizing and replacement. So those are added costs that perhaps would not have to be realized in the suburban areas. And then there's land assemblage and financing issues. We've learned that the appraised value of property in some of these areas is less than the actual cost of constructing the improvement. So we have a gap between the market value of the home and the actual cost of constructing it. And people with Habitat for Humanity and Mennonite housing are very familiar with those gaps. So anyway, these are some of the issues that we have to try to mitigate and see what we can do as a city, particularly in terms of our regulations in making it easier. So, and here's one particular trend that we believe is really shaping the urban infill development activity levels over the next 20 years, and that is what is referred to as the rise of the rental housing market. And there's a lot of research on this currently. And basically what's going on here is that since 2005, when home ownership rates in the country peaked at about 69%, they've been starting to trend downward. This is the national average here. Wichita actually is lower, surprisingly, than the national average, both in 2010 and 2015. But the projections are that by 2050, which is, it's a long time out, we're going to be back to levels experienced post-World War II, around 55% in 1950. So these are the projections of some experts. Time will tell whether this plays out or not. But the forecast is that half or more of all new housing units through 2050 could be for rental. And these are the 3 reasons why. One is elevated financing underwriting standards through the lending institutions over the last few years, combined with student debt factors. And we're looking at the millennial generation here as the largest age cohort of future home buyers. The second factor here is changing views of young professionals on home ownerships. Not only do they have some of these financial underwriting issues to deal with, but for many young professionals, owning a home is an impediment to career mobility. And renting a home provides, it makes it easier to move from city to city in finding new career opportunities without the burdens of selling a home, paying realtor fees, etc. And it's just a different lifestyle priority. The boomer generation, obviously home ownership was a very high priority, and the evidence, the research suggests that it's not as high priority for millennials. And then the third here is economic and demographic shifts. Some researchers are anticipating that future households won't have the income levels necessary to qualify for home ownership. We're also seeing a rise in single-person households. I think I've talked to you before about that, that half of all households by 2025 nationwide could be single-person households. Same households without children by 2030, roughly 80% will have no children. So that impacts housing market demand and housing type. And then by 2035, one third of all households will be headed by someone 65 or older. So all of these are causing a shift in the housing market. And how it's all going to play out, I mean, I don't think anyone really knows. It remains to be seen, but we have to start adjusting and planning ahead for this kind of shift. And we've seen this here in the Wichita housing market. And I'll show you a couple of charts where the building permit data verifies this is going on here in Wichita, particularly in the duplex type of housing accommodation. Duplexes are attractive because they provide a single family type lifestyle without the cost of either renting or owning a single family home. And also duplexes have lower permitting, engineering, construction fees than higher densities of multifamily. So they're cheaper, if you will, to build. So here's the data for Wichita since 2009. I'll show you here. This is you can see single family home construction is trending down. This is the total, and you can see this is the multifamily portion here, starting to trend up again the last couple of years, and through to today. This is still the trend, and this is the duplex. You can see that it's held its own and starting to rise. So it represents about 7% of all new dwelling units in Wichita. And then as a percent, as a ratio to single family, it's trending up to about 21% in relation to single family. So this is the trend. So the question is, what will infill look like? And we've got the spectrum of residential infill housing examples here that range basically anywhere from a single family home to a high-rise apartment. So this is your typical suburban single family home here in Wichita. This is an urban single family home. And this is high density urban. These are the shotgun homes. We don't see too many of them here in Wichita. These are on the 25-foot lots. And then we have the tiny home, and I've heard there's a developer here that wants to do a tiny home development here in Wichita sometime this year. Then we have the detached cottage court where you have the common area. I don't think we have anything like that here, but these are single units, but they have the common property. This is the next gen unit. There's a couple of these in Derby. I had a chance to go through one a couple of years ago. Very nice, very expensive. But this is the second, it's not a dwelling unit, it's a housing unit. It's not dwelling because it doesn't have 220 wiring for a stove. But for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like a duplex, but it looks like a single family home. And then this is the accessory dwelling unit. We have a lot of these in the older part of the city, and they're typically lofts above a garage, or they can be a part of the main residential unit here. So you can see infill can be very finely grained, and then it can move into higher densities and scale of redevelopment. So we're moving into the larger grain development here. This is duplex side by side. This is duplex stacked. This is a fourplex project near Bidding Street. These were done in the late 80s and early 90s in the Riverside neighborhood. We have no design guidelines. These were done voluntarily by the developer. It's basically a single family, basically historic type neighborhood around it, and these were tried to be designed in a manner that would be context sensitive. These are fourplexes in East Wichita. This is south of Douglas and east of Hillside on, I think, Oakland. There's another shot there. These have been here for a long time. These are fourplex homes in West Wichita. Been there for a while. There's another view. And then a fourplex can be an apartment, a row home, or townhome type configuration. These are examples not from around here, but it shows you how, based on design, you can have multiple units that look like large single-family homes. And this is a large apartment. This is, you can see here, this is what the traditional pattern is. So it's still quite, in terms of scale, it's quite larger than the single-family home there. Anyway, and then of course we have Hillcrest, our high-rise apartment here. So that gives you an idea of the spectrum of the type of infill activity that we could probably see here in the next 20 years. So I want to take you through the 12 implementation actions. They're summarized on this 2-page sheet that I believe you have as a handout. 12 actions have been identified. I'm going to focus on the 3 that the planning department's involved with, and they relate to the zoning code and urban infill design guidelines, because I think there may be more of interest to you than these others which are maybe customized to Wichita. So the first one was the creation of the Urban Infill Advisory Committee. This is a 30-member committee that was appointed by the mayor and the city council about 6 months ago, and we have 16 representatives from the community at large, representing engineering, architects, non-for-profit developers, for-profit builders, realtors, commercial realtors, planning commissioners. We have 7 representing neighborhood associations, 1 each from the 6 city council districts and 1 city council member. So we have quite a spectrum of interest and insight to bounce these ideas off as they're developed and recommended to the governing body. So we just had our last meeting last night. I had our 4th meeting. So I'm going to talk about 2 things. Really here is the making changes to the zoning code in terms of property development standards to address some of those setback issues and parking requirements. And then the other is the development of a design guideline to help expedite infill development. I want to go over the neighborhood issues because I'm sure these are issues that you would experience in any one of your communities as well. Neighborhoods are typically concerned about increasing property densities or increasing local traffic. They're concerned about increasing renters in their neighborhood. They're obviously concerned about building design that doesn't match or fit in with the look of their neighborhood. And they're concerned about either perceived or real changes in property values. So, as a rule, infill equals uncertainty for a neighborhood, and therefore neighborhoods tend to be very tentative, and they tend to object to infill development because we have a process that really doesn't allow them to visualize and assess the impact of infill development early on in the process. Typically, it's later on in the process when you get to a planning commission hearing or a neighborhood meeting, and by then the die has been cast and you're just kind of responding to a proposal. So this is what we're trying to address here. How can we overcome some of those impediments? So we're thinking that urban infill design guidelines can address some of these issues. They can address quality of development in terms of the building character, scale, mass, modulation, footprint, materials, design, height, length, articulations, and compatibility with surrounding structures. The idea of the guideline is it would be a voluntary. The concept with a guideline is if a developer is willingly complies with the requirements of a guideline, he's entitled to a fast track approval, which could be simply just going and applying for a building permit. So that saves time, money, expense, heartburn, and might make the project viable. The default option is status quo. Basically fight it out with the neighborhood. Go to a contentious rezoning application process and public hearing. So provide options. So a design guideline cannot address these issues of renter versus owner. Of course, that's something, unless you live in a covenant neighborhood, or we have a homeowner association, there's nothing really preventing all the homes on your street from being rented out. Something that really we can't control as a government entity. Local street traffic, increasing population densities, and changes in property values. So that's kind of the issues that we're wrestling with. I can tell you that our steering committee meeting last evening, the Urban Infill Advisory Committee said yes in principle, and have directed staff to start developing a set of draft design guidelines to see what they would look like and how effective they could be. So they agreed in principle to the concept, but the devil's always in the details, and time will tell whether we can craft a guideline that will work for everyone involved, the developer and the neighborhood and the community at large. So with that, I think that's the end of my presentation.